So as of late, there's been complaints from Netflix users that when they log on, this screen pops up. Then it just freezes. Now take a closer look. Mosquitoes, double helix, and this is a shot of the Americas. Mosquitoes all in red. Now most users think nothing of it, back out of Netflix, go back in, everything works fine. But a large amount of them are raising the obvious question. What is it? What does it mean? Some believe it's a warning. Others believe it's the government showing us what's to come, because they believe that when they show us what's about to happen, that it gives them some roundabout right to go through with it. Now by it, I mean this. A Bill Gates funded firm released 150,000 genetically modified mosquitoes into the wild. And by wild, they're referring to the United States, namely Florida. And they will continue to release 12,000 mosquitoes every week for 16 weeks, in hopes that by the end of the year, over 20 million mosquitoes will have been created after mating. Now how does it work and why are they doing this? Well, I'm glad you asked. First, the why. The proposed objective? To curb malaria and the dengue fever. And they're going to do this by using the Aedes aegypti species of mosquito, being that the females of this particular mosquito species carry and spread the diseases while the males simply can't. So Bill Gates funded Oxitec out of the UK would genetically engineer the males to carry a certain gene. This particular trait or gene gets passed on to the offspring, killing the female offspring in the early larva stages, while allowing the males to be born continuously carrying the trait, hoping that by some miracle they can actually defeat Mother Nature and kill off all the females in this particular mosquito species. But good news guys, they've already ran test trials, so we aren't the guinea pigs. In Brazil, Malaysia, Panama, and the Cayman Islands. Now at this point, Oxitec hadn't received regulatory permission to release them in the United States until recently. It apparently started in May. Notice how this one kind of flew under the radar? And I couldn't help it. As I was reading the articles, a couple questions popped into my head. As a US citizen, I currently live in Michigan. How many people do I know that have ever had dengue fever and or malaria? 0. So of course, I took the liberty to look it up. Here you'll see which countries are the main contributors to the malaria cases worldwide. Notice that the US percentage is so small, they didn't even list it. And as I continued, I found that only 2,000 people in the United States per year get malaria. The vast majority of those cases were immigrants and or travelers from foreign countries. Hardly any domestic cases. And now the dengue fever. Only 70 local transmitted cases in Florida and 10 in Texas. So what's the real agenda here, Bill? Stay. The picture behind me was only recently released to the public by the Russian government. It's said to be the last picture taken by one of the hikers who died in the Dyatlov Pass incident. It was January 27th, 1959, when 10 hikers, 8 men and 2 women, set on a voyage through the Ural Mountains. The first few days went as planned, except for one hiker, Yuri Yudin. Just a few days in the hike, he had to turn back because of an ailing knee injury. He was disappointed, but at the time he did not realize it would actually save his life. But just before he turns back, Igor Dyatlov, the group leader, would tell him to watch for them. They were supposed to return around February 12th. The 12th would come and they still hadn't returned, but nobody raised a concern until later. Due to the difficulty of the hike, Yuri didn't think much of it. He gave it another week. But more than a week later, they still hadn't showed. So on February 20th, 1959, Yuri would call his friends in missing. Government officials would be shocked at what they'd find. It's February 1st, and the remaining 9 hikers run into a blizzard. As a result, they would end up stopping at a camp base near a mountain. Here, they would drop off the excess gear they gained from Yuri's departure. After this, despite local Mansi tribes warning them not to go through, they would continue up the slope of Dead Man's Mountain. According to the last journal entry, this is where they would set up camp, just a few hundred yards up the mountain. Just a couple hours after nightfall, they would start hearing a whistling sound. And not just any whistle. It would resemble a deep, train-like whistle. It would continue to get closer and closer until whatever it was just outside of their tent. At this time, they began cutting holes at the top with their knives to peek through, before eventually cutting a massive hole and escaping from the inside of the tent. These educated and experienced hikers would leave their tent with no gear and would begin walking single file in 2 to 3 feet of snow. So on February 20th, 1959, the first thing the investigators would find is their tent ravaged. They would continue to follow their footprints until they found the bodies. But the way they looked and their injuries weren't consistent with freezing to death. A couple of men had sustained injuries similar to that of a car crash, broken ribs, and a crushed skull. They'd find multiple bodies mutilated, tongues torn out. Along with a few cameras, almost every hiker had a camera. Multiple pictures were taken, and one of the last ones they just recently released to the public. This would be the last picture they took before they lost their lives. The local Mansi natives would refer to them as Mank, forest people, what the Russians call the Yeti. Two of the officials from the search party in their later years would admit that they had pictures of footprints. They would also find pictures of what seemed to be bright flashing lights. And just a day after their presumed death on February 2nd, the Russian government would discontinue a mission to catch one. What a coincidence. Maybe those were the flashing lights? Like and follow for more. The picture behind me was only recent.
Dan was dead. Okay. And Wyatt is a good man, probably one of the best men I know, now dead. Before I'd left, they were already starting what they call a 9-line, which is a medevac request. They're sending out a medevac request, then all of a sudden it's not a medevac request. All of a sudden we had a helicopter show up because, like I told you, it was a large precipice and a sheer drop. So the helicopter just came up from the drop. They had dropped netting, which is like cargo netting. It's like squares. We were told we had to bundle him up. And we get another bigger helicopter. But it's almost like a Jolly Green Giant used to look back in the day that could get, through this area. Because the mountains, you gotta remember, Chinooks could only go in certain places because they had enough lift. Mm-hmm. And so we got him on there. The thing was too big. We couldn't move it. It smelled worse than a skunk. A corpse that's been around for a while.
Really fell.
Oh, it was like a combination because of the, how do you put that, the persistence of a skunk smell. But once the helicopter came in, dropped its little hook, and off he goes. The communication was sent out that we had a very large possible human creature.
There you are in the hills of Afghanistan. How many troop members are you with?
We had 6 on my crew, and when we say hills of Afghanistan, for us, we did not fly into the wilderness. We actually flew into a base. I guess this thing was transloaded out of the mountains by a CH-47. But I could see that it did have the 6 fingers. I remember taking my foot up and placing it up next to its foot, and it was extremely large. We estimated at about 12 feet, give or take. What I can tell you is the weight of the thing. Basically, it was approximately 1,500 pounds when it was getting on the aircraft. Now, if you take away the pallet weight and all the rigging that we had to hold this thing down, we figured it was around 1,100 pounds.
Of course we're upset. That's a given, okay? We lost a very good guy. But add to that, you're discussing something that even in our after action report, they're saying rewrite it. And we had to rewrite it the way they wanted.
How many fingers?
6, oh, 6
fingers
toes.
and 6 toes.
And the nails were weird because if you see somebody that ever has, I don't know what it's called, but it's
Like a fungus on
the nails, how they get pointy and they're like gnarly. That's what they look like.
This is the story of Admiral Byrd and the hidden truth surrounding Operation High Jump, an operation that ended in an all-out battle with aliens that emerged from the Arctic shelf. The mission, which was officially titled the United States Navy Antarctic Development Program, took place from 1946 to 1947 and was led by infamous pilot Admiral Richard Byrd. The infamous Admiral Byrd was known for receiving the Congressional Medal of Honor for flying to the North and South Poles. In his journals that were released upon his son's untimely death in 1988, where he was last seen leaving for a Nat Geo convention honoring Byrd, and later ended up being found in a warehouse, toothless and beaten. In this journal that Byrd kept throughout Operation High Jump, they found the initial map he drew of Hollow Earth. This diary, which had went missing for years, was a well-documented account of their encounters in the Antarctic. This journal even stated that he encountered craft that could fly pole to pole in just mere seconds. As they departed in August of 1946, They had no idea what they were in for. As Byrd's naval fleet of 13 ships, 33 airplanes, and almost 5,000 men approached Antarctica, one of the radio men on the USS Brownson stated, and I quote, "Me and my shipmates on the pilot house port side watched for several minutes bright lights that ascended about 45 degrees into the sky very quickly, and that they couldn't ID the lights because their equipment only went 250 miles in a straight line. And these were only the initial warnings. For Byrd, things were about to get much worse. That day came too soon, as Lieutenant Pilot John Sayerson stated. The thing shot up out of the water with tremendous velocity, almost as if being chased by the devil himself. Everybody hesitated for a second as if stunned, as the thing sat there and floated, tempting us to make the first move. That's when Byrd stated that it wasn't by his command, but one of the ships began opening fire on the UFO. That resulted in all-out mayhem as the two sides began exchanging fire. Wasn't long before our losses were too great. After a small skirmish with the Arctic aliens, Admiral Byrd had lost 2 ships, completely disappeared, a small handful of planes, and a few unlucky men. After the skirmish and everything settled down, Admiral Byrd heard a voice in his head. This voice was actually responsible for the fleet going to Antarctica at all. In the original documents, Admiral Byrd heard voices in his head 6 months before the trip was even an idea. They messaged him shortly after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. So after hearing the voices again, he quickly flew down through one of the Sims holes. This is when he met with beings he called the Masters, the Innkeepers of Earth. General Byrd, you are a man of stature, they said. You're a hero among your people. They trust your word. So we send you with a message. The bombs you set off have more power than you know. And if we continue on this path, our future will be dark. Byrd relayed the message, died 10 years later.
This guy was on the phone with 911 because there was a weird humanoid creature staring at him from outside of his house. I'm gonna roll the clip right now.
It's on video. Huh?
Not a person?
No, it's an evil identity. It's evil entity. This thing's like wicked looking. But it's a human form though. You gotta wait until you see the video. I got it on video. It's
okay, good.
This is like one out of a million things that people will not. They'll think they won't think I'm crazy no more. Wait until you see this. Oh my God! It's like you should see this thing, Mike. Oh my God! Like a gargoyle. It's like a gargoyle, man. And it's like 5 feet.
These are the 7 archangels of heaven. Starting with number 7, the Archangel Chamuel, he who sees God. His mission, bring peace to the world, so he protects us from lower vibrations and negative energies. Number 6, Azrael, which means who God helps. Often referred to as the angel of death. He helps souls in the transition from life to death. Archangel number 5, Ariel, the lioness of God. The patron saint of animals, she protects Earth's natural resources and wildlife. Number 4, Jophiel, meaning the beauty of God. She's the patron saint of artists. She helps us see and maintain the beauty in life, and also loves when you stay positive. Number 3, Archangel Gabriel, meaning God is my strength. He's often seen holding a trumpet and is the messenger of God. Number 2, Raphael, meaning God heals. He not only helps heal individuals, but helps healers as well. Number 1, Archangel Michael, meaning he who is as God, the most powerful of all angels, the patron angel of righteousness, justice, and mercy. So last week my buddy came over who collects rocks, and he had this crystal. He claimed he found it a long time ago by Lake Michigan, and that he keeps it on him at all times because it gives him good luck, it gives him good aura. I thought, cool, so it kind of fascinated me, and I looked it up later that night. It ended up me being up half the night reading about a civilization I never knew existed that used these crystals to store information. It was an ancient civilization of higher beings known as the Lemurians. It is thought that the Lemurians lived at the same time as the Atlanteans. In 1864, Philip Sclater hypothesized another landmass must exist, due to lemurs being found in Madagascar and India but not Africa or Middle East. Experts believe the lost land of Lemuria was the first continent in the Pacific. It is said that Lemurians were the first galactic beings to set foot on Mother Earth, and their technology was much more advanced than anything we have now. So these crystals supposedly come from these Lemurian beings. Lemurians are considered beings of pure love and light. It is said they vibrate at the highest frequency, considered the keepers of Earth, like for part. History of the Anunnaki, Atlanteans, and Lemurians. When the Anunnaki first got here, they landed in the ocean, but established a place called Eridu on land. Eridu translates to home far away. That leads me to believe they established their base in Antarctica, pre-Ice Age. Here's Africa, here's Antarctica. Check out the pictures of this recently discovered map of Antarctica with no ice. After establishing their base in Antarctica, the Anunnaki started their gold mines in South Africa. When the gold mines were finally up and running, they built a base on Mars to establish a midway point between Earth and Nibiru. Initially, the Anunnaki were using an ancient alien race known as the Agigi for their labor force. Translated ancient Sumerian text actually shows that the Agigi were believed to be the good gods and the Anunnaki the evil gods. Here, Sumerians portrayed the Agigi as a more human-like hybrid. As you can see here, the Anunnaki are depicted holding the bag. Stay tuned, gonna be good. This is the legend of Mount Shasta and the city of Telos. For decades now, people of Mount Shasta, California have claimed that a highly advanced ancient civilization lives in the mountain, known as Lemurians. And this is their story. Around 25,000 years ago, the Atlanteans, who lived in Atlantis, the Lemurians from Lemuria, broke out into an all-out nuclear war over differing ideologies. See, the Atlanteans wanted to take over lesser civilizations and enslave them. But the Lemurians, who were peace-loving beings of light, said they should be left alone to evolve on their own. The result, the thermonuclear war that ravaged our planet. When the super nuke Nara 1 went off, it caused massive earthquakes on the Richter scale of up to 15. These massive shifts in the Earth's tectonic plates caused supervolcanoes and mega tsunamis that wiped out civilizations and species across the planet. Once the cataclysm started, the fighting stopped. They realized what they had done, but it was too late. Part 2.